You know, Jen, in addition to being a special education advocate, I'm also a disability specialist. What that means is I actually went back to school and took a special training in the issues and the trends that face people with disabilities. And there was a lot of focus on the history of the disability rights movement, which I absolutely am fascinated by.
It is a fascinating
and
history, yeah.
Can't get enough of it and read about it. So I have several books that I would highly recommend to parents to understand how did we get to where we are today, and how did the laws become the laws about special education. And
what's so great about that, and I know you and I have a few of these in our common libraries, right, is that to understand the underpinnings for some of the rules that are out there, some of the laws that are out there, you have to have a historical context, because sometimes they don't make sense unless you think about how they came about. An example being the least restrictive environment provision. There's a strong history behind that and why we have it. So it's really great to know the history.
And you know, the other thing is it's not a very old history. We're talking about very recent history because the special education rights are fairly young compared to other history. So one of the ones that I would highly recommend is it's called Disabled Rights, and it's an American disability policy and the fight for equality. And basically, it's just a book about the discrimination that people with disability have faced, and it's historical accounts about the disability rights movement and disability policy. For me, it's a fascinating read. It is you'd be surprised what there is to learn about the disability rights movement and the history of it. Another one is called No Pity, and it is People with Disabilities Forging a New Civil Rights Movement. And this one is by Joseph Shapiro. I forgot to mention that this one, Disabled Rights, is by Jacqueline Vaughn Switzer. So sorry about that. So No Pity is really a book that gives you a new perspective on how we look at people with disabilities.
Eye-opening book.
And especially from the perspective of the person who has a disability. And to get into the frame of mind that people with disabilities do not like to be pitied. That's the whole perspective of this book. As well, it's really a must-read to understand the disability rights movement.
Well, and I love this book. And one of the things I love about this book is that if you're a parent and you haven't, until you found out that your child had a disability, you have not had personal experience with disability. This is such an enlightening and eye-opening book. It is really a great insight into not just the history of the disability rights movement, but it just changes the way you think. And I think it's a fascinating read.
And as an example, if you're not familiar with the concept of people first language, instead of saying that person is autistic, you might say my child who has autism. Put the person before the disability. So little things like that you'll pick up from this book. And then the third one that I'm highly recommending is Nothing About Us Without Us, and it's Disability Oppression and Empowerment. And this book is by James Charlton. This book gives more of an international perspective on the disability rights movement and the history of the disability rights movement, not only in the United States, but in other countries, which unfortunately in many circumstances is far behind the United States. So it's another perspective of the disability rights movement.